Hi, this is Scott, and welcome back to Infants on Thrones. Today's listener essay comes from Don. It's a powerful story of self-discovery and identity. Big thanks to Don for all the hard work he put into the essay and for being so patient with us. I think you'll really enjoy it.
This is Infants on Thrones, the philosophies of men mingled with humor. We are the core.
Listener essay.
What did Jesus do when they sentenced him to die? Did he try to run away? Did he just break down and cry? No, Jesus dug down deep, knowing what he had to do. When faced with his own death, Jesus knew that he had to man up. He had to man up. So he crawled upon that cross and he stuck it out. And he manned up. Christ, he manned up. And taught us all what real manning up is about. Now it's up to me and it's time to man up. Jesus had his time, to now it's mine to man up. I'm taking the reins, I'm crossing the bear. Just like Jesus, I'm growing a pair. I've got to stand up, can't just clam up. It's time to man up.
The bishop's advice was kind of to the other young men in the ward were, we need to help butch him up.
Man up.
He doesn't want you running with your arms flailing around.
Man up.
In the blessing, he says, I bless you that you will not be a wussy, because the Lord does not like wussies.
Man up.
So I got to tell you guys, when I was like 12 years old and I got pit hair, you couldn't keep a shirt on me at scout outings. Like, I was walking around with my hands up over my head, just letting my armpit hair out for the whole world to see.
I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm kind of a man now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, hey, where's your armpit hair?
Watch me man up like nobody else. I'm gonna man up all over myself.
Put it away and overcome it.
Put it away?
Yeah, zip up.
Yeah, and overcome it.
The signal of worthy manhood is self-control.
What did Jesus do when they put nails in his hand? Did he scream like a girl, or did he take it like a man? When someone had to die to save us from our sins, Jesus said, I'll do it, and he took it on the chin.
There are some circumstances in which young men may be tempted to handle one another, to have contact with one another physically in unusual ways. Latter-day Saint young men are not to do this. When a young man is finding his way into manhood, such experiences can misdirect his normal desires and pervert him. Physical mischief with another man is forbidden. It is forbidden of the Lord. There is a falsehood that some are born with an attraction to their own kind and that they can do nothing about it. They are just that way. No one is locked into that kind of life. Boys are to become men, masculine, manly men. No one is predestined to a life of perversion.
I have maggots in my scrotum.
You will make someone a great wife someday. I was 10, my brothers 15 and 17. There is a context where the statement could have been a compliment. A loving, affirming interchange between two protective, adoring older brothers and their cherished younger sister. This was not that context. I was their brother, not their sister, and their declaration was a taunt of ridicule and disgust with not even a veiled attempt to pretend otherwise. Up to this point in my life, I had not felt different or other than. Since that day, more than 40 years ago, I have been challenged to feel anything but. What my brothers had successfully conveyed was there was something about me which, in their judgment, was more similar to my sisters and less like them. I was other to them.
Leaders, and especially parents, should recognize that there is a distinct masculine nature and a distinct feminine nature. Whatever disturbs or weakens or tends to erase that difference erodes the family and reduces the probability of happiness for all concerned.
I grew up during the 60s and 70s in rural Utah. When my father and brothers were out on the farm working, I preferred to stay in the house and help my mother can or preserve what was harvested from the farm. My brothers and father would drive the tractors, and I came up with plans to make the area where they were parked look more organized and less trashy. My interests were not in sports or hunting, but in making crafts out of yarn and creating dried flower arrangements.
Boys are to become men, masculine, manly men.
When I was 7, an older sister overheard 2 of us younger siblings calling each other queer, which in our minds meant weird or strange. No, we were told, that meant that a man loved another man, or a woman another woman. At age 12, I discovered some pornographic magazines that belonged to a neighbor. While generally aroused by the sensuality being portrayed, it was not the naked bodies of the women that most drew my gaze and repeated interest, but the pictures of the occasional naked man. When I was in high school, my personal fascination with other guys became more obvious. This at the same time that my male friends were obsessed with girls. I was once staring with curiosity at the crotch of another boy who seemed to be unusually well endowed behind his jeans. Apparently, I was not the only one who noticed this, as while in the midst of my looking, the owner of said jeans, and the package stuffed into them, called out another boy for looking at him in the same way and pronounced that boy a fag in the presence of the 10 or so other guys standing around.
Well, thanks. Somebody had to do it, and it wouldn't... and it wouldn't be well for a general authority to solve a problem in that way.
While relieved that I was not the one so publicly proclaimed and shamed, something fell into place inside of me, like a turned page of one of those childhood board books that allow you to mix and match the legs, torso, or head of various types of people. In my early 20s, my mother noticed my looking at young couples coming into the stands of a rodeo we were attending. She asked if I wished one of those girls were on a date with me. How could I tell her that no, I was instead longing to replace the girls as the date of the guys they were with? At 25, I decided to settle the question of my sexual orientation in a rational, logical, definitive way. I bought a copy of a Playgirl and a Playboy and took them back to my apartment. I nervously devoured the images in each of them and then, in shame, sent them both down the apartment building's incinerator chute. My conclusion? I definitely preferred men. But even with that evidence and confirmation, I remember consciously refusing to accept an identity of being gay. The ramifications of that were just too severe to consider.
Homosexuality is an ugly sin. We do not hesitate to tell the world that the cure for these evils is not in surrender. If all the people in the world were to accept homosexuality, the practice would still be deep, dark sin.
Imagine that your brain is made of tiny boxes, then find the box that's gay and crush it!
At age 26, I officially transitioned to being a menace to society, per the words of Brigham Young. Feeling the guilt intended with this statement, I purchased and wore a plain wedding band on the ring finger of my right hand to remind me that it was misplaced and belonged on the other. Around the same time, I was called into the bishopric as a counselor, and then 6 months later to the stake high council. My assignment was to be over the single adult programs of the stake, and I quickly became viewed as the most eligible LDS bachelor in the tri-state area. During this time, I had several significant dating relationships, but was terrified at the idea of kissing or even holding hands with these women. Then at a singles conference held in a neighboring state, I met the woman who would be my wife. She was everything that the women in my life previously had not been: outspoken, smart, funny, and as a convert of just 1 year, had a burning testimony of the restored gospel. Most importantly, she really liked me, but at the same time seemed content to move on if I did not return her affection. Her interest in me, without fawning over me, was intoxicating. After 4 months of long-distance dating, we were engaged and then married 5 months later. Several months into our courtship, I felt the need to finally take it physical.
Let's get physical, physical. I wanna get physical. Let's get into physical. Let me hear your body talk. Your body talk. Let me hear your body talk.
But at the age of 27, I had virgin lips, along with virgin everything else. My love interest had been sexually active before joining the church and changing her ways, so I invited her to teach me how to kiss. After an evening of watching romantic movies, the stage was set, and the instruction began. She says I was a fast learner and a natural. I was beyond ecstatic. I was aroused for the first time in my life by something other than my own thoughts or an image on a page. This was a real, live person, and it was a woman. If I could be sexually aroused by kissing a woman, I couldn't possibly be gay. With these thoughts and a renewed hope that this marriage thing could potentially work for me, I shared with her regarding my being attracted to other men. I had never acted on these feelings, and since we had obviously both enjoyed the kissing and necking and wanted more, we proceeded with our plans to be married. We felt that we were both strong enough and worthy of God's blessings enough to make our marriage work in spite of the obvious challenges and obstacles.
So the one thing that makes our marriage different than most is the fact that I am homosexual.
Yep.
But I've chosen to marry Lolly because I love her very much.
Wow.
It's an interesting story to say the least, but he says, if you're gay, there are pros and cons to living your life in either way. So he really wanted to have children. He really wanted to stay true to his religion, which is part of the reason why he made this decision to marry a woman. As a woman, to know that my husband never really found me attractive and kind of forced himself to be with me because he wanted kids and he wanted to stay true to his religion, I would hate feeling that way.
I might as well have married a woman. I was 28. My wife, of just several months, was 30. There it was, a statement identical in meaning to that issued by my brothers 18 years earlier. Those two declarations now stood like looming 2001 Space Odyssey obelisk-like bookends in my life, proclaiming that I was not acceptable, defective, bad, sick, wrong. My wife and I were not sexually compatible. She was on one end of the libido bell curve, and I was at the other. 5 times a week was her stride, and once every 3 weeks was mine. She understandably felt unvalued, and I inconsequential. She had expectations of God and of me for sexual reward after having been celibate for the previous 18 months since joining the LDS Church. And I, a virgin, and still unsure of my sexual orientation, felt overwhelmed by her expectations. I wish I could say that we decided to end the marriage. Friends and family advised me this was the best course to take, they not even knowing the details, just seeing the unhappiness in my countenance. We did not. We felt that God had told us we were supposed to be married to each other. We had made eternal covenants in His holy temple, and we were going to make it work or die trying. We postured that perhaps we had even signed up in the pre-existence for our individual challenges and those as a couple in order to help each other become more Christ-like and earn our eternal exaltation together. Who were we to say no to these opportunities for growth that God had provided for our benefit?
The Lord has said that in order to obtain the highest of the 3 heavens or degrees of glory in the celestial kingdom, a man must enter into this order of the priesthood, meaning the new and everlasting covenant of marriage. There are some men who fail to marry through their own choice. They deprive themselves. There may be many women who also deprive themselves of blessings. Let no man defy God. Any good man and any good woman can have happiness and a successful marriage if both are willing to pay the price.
25 years later, after counseling with multiple bishops, 24 individual and joint therapists, and thousands of dollars of expenditures toward healing as individuals and as a couple, we finally divorced. At the time of the divorce, I was 15 years into a diagnosis of a genetic disorder, which, among other symptoms, causes my body to not be able to process the hormone testosterone. It turns out this issue had always been present in my life, contributing to my reduced libido even as a young adult. Ah, the twists and turns and ironies of life. I once believed, as taught by LDS Family Services and the pro-reparative therapy organization Evergreen, that my same-sex attraction, SSA for short, was caused by the abuse of my brothers, the emotional smothering of my mother, and the distance of my father, and as such, it could be cured. I, too, could be heterosexual. Along with this belief was the assurance that no one was born gay, and that all sins, sorrows, and conditions of this life were covered by Christ's atonement, SSA included. The problem, they said, was one of having experienced a lack of connection with the masculine while developing my identity as an adolescent, and thus things could be done to go back and repair that connection.
I have helped thousands of men in their journeys to overcome same-sex attraction, and now I'm here to help you.
Journey into manhood changed my life. I learned that I really could change and move away from attraction to my own gender.
Journey into manhood is for you if you have unwanted same-sex attraction and being gay just doesn't work for you. It's not who you feel like you are. It conflicts with your religious values. It's not what you want in your life.
After 20 years of doing all that was prescribed to me by these coaches, counselors, and ecclesiastical leaders, with no diminishing of my attraction to men or increase of attraction to women, I wholeheartedly disagree with Boyd Packer and all others who insist that I was not made this way. While I and other men on a similar journey have shown that behaviors can be modified, allowing for celibacy for a time and a level of success in a mixed orientation marriage, the degree of suppression and behavior management needed to accomplish this is not conducive to a joy-filled life.
Our data revealed that 0% of our sample reported being able to eliminate their same-sex attraction. 0%. Conversely, over 80% of our sample characterized their attempts at sexual orientation change as either ineffective or extremely damaging. Next, we inquired regarding the two most common paths chosen by religious LGBT Mormons, which are either entering into a mixed orientation marriage or a heterosexual marriage, or living a life of celibacy. What we discovered was that the divorce rate for mixed orientation marriages approached 75%, with extremely low quality of life ratings. Perhaps even more alarming, we discovered that those who chose celibacy reported quality of life scores lower than the scores of people who have a debilitating illness called lupus, which symptoms include difficulty breathing, chest pains, bleeding, infections, skin rashes, nose sores, hair loss, and seizures.
So as a recently disaffected Mormon, I now have different answers to the same questions that I have always had. I believe that both nature and nurture likely play a role in homosexuality, and regardless of the percentage mix of these two factors, all individuals have a right to form a relationship, have sexual fulfillment with, and marry whomever they choose to, free of religious and societal shame and condemnation. Would I personally have embraced life as a gay man if the first time I was aroused by another person was due to kissing another man rather than a woman? I am not sure, as the hold that the teachings of the LDS Church had on me was very strong. I do feel that if I had experienced homosexual behavior with another man, it would have been very difficult for me to enter into a marriage with a woman. I instead would have likely fallen into a shame-based life in the closet, with suicide a very real option, as it has unfortunately been for all too many others who have traveled a similar path. Would I have gotten married when I did, or at all, if I had not felt societal and eternal pressure from the LDS Church? The answer to this is no. And if I had married and things went south, I would have been much quicker to choose divorce as an honorable option. Without the promise of a conscious hereafter with an eternal reward, life is too short to stubbornly stay on a path once it is obvious the choice was a mistake rather than a God-directed opportunity for growth. I do not see a gay straight world, or even one with 50 shades of bi thrown in. I believe humanity presents a wonderful scattergraph of potential healthy sexual expression. I really like these words spoken by Liam Neeson playing Alfred Kinsey in the 2004 movie Kinsey.
Everyone is different. The problem is, most people want to be the same. They find it easier to simply ignore this fundamental aspect of the human condition. They're so eager to be part of the group that they'll betray their own nature to get there.
Do I still feel other than? Yes, I do. The difference now is it is more than just a feeling, it is a fact. I am part of a sexual minority. Honestly, there is still a part of me that wishes this were not so. I would so like to be the same as everyone else, but I am no longer willing to betray my nature to get there. I am daily finding new friends and support from those who are perfectly fine with who I am and do not judge me as defective. And I am less frequently seeking approval and validation from those who cannot or will not give it to me. While I am now personally more accepting of my sexual orientation, I still do not feel the need to proclaim it as an identity. Who I am is so much more rich and complex than that narrow focus. However, if pressed, I would say that I am borderline asexual due to a genetic fluke, with an aversion to physical intimacy with women and a desire for masculine connection, which has the potential to be expressed sexually. That having been said, outside the context of this essay and the discussion to follow, my sexual leanings are none of anyone else's damn business.
I'm doing fantastic.
Good. Are you regretting this yet?
We'll have to see. About 5 minutes into it, I'll let you know.
All right.
That was a gut wrenching, by the way. That was so. You did such a great job of splicing in just the right general authority quotes in their own.
Yeah, it was
great.
Yeah, it was very cringe-inducing.
Yeah.
When I first did it without any audio, I'm thinking, man, this is so damn depressing. There's no way I can submit this thing. So, I tried to lighten it up a bit, but also, those quotes are time appropriate to the ages that I threw them in at. Being as old as I am, I actually heard those things, and those were the messages that I received throughout my life.
Ugh.
Oh man, that's rough because that's harsher than it is now.
That's way harsher. Listen to some of those old clips. I mean, we've all heard the Packer stuff because we've done the Little Factories episode, but then some of those other clips that you used.
So I gathered from just from inference from your listener essay, you're in your 50s, right?
I'm 54.
54, okay. Well, I just thought it was interesting that you're one of those people, one of those homosexual people that have seen the before Harvey Milk era, or the before the Harvey Milk and the post Harvey Milk, and it's not like everything was lollipops and rainbows after Harvey Milk was killed. It was still a slow cultural process, but I just thought it was interesting that you were that you're old enough to have seen both sides, kind of like, a black person who experienced Jim Crow laws and then the Cosby Show.
Well, so here's the thing, though, Randy. While that time frame is true, my actually identifying as a gay man or homosexual prior to 2 months ago, I did not. And so, even though I remember it's
2 months, what?
I had no idea it was that recent.
Yeah, it's that recent.
Whoa.
So when I was in high school, I remember the Harvey Milk thing happening, but did not own that in any way because of my adherence to what the church taught. There was no way that I identified as gay. And even in my listener's essay, you heard that even at age 25, after looking at the Playboy and Playgirl and unequivocally knowing that I was more attracted to men, I would not identify myself as gay. And even back when Proposition 8 was going on in California, which was I was living here in Utah, but it was probably the first thing that went on my shelf, so to speak, because I thought this is just bullshit that they're asking us to do this as members of the church. But at the same time, it wasn't personal because I was not gay like the TLC special says.
Ugh.
I had same-sex attraction.
That was not at all what I gathered from your
Oh
essay.
my gosh,
I had
yeah.
no idea you were like newer out of the believing closet than I am, and that you had this whole long. I mean, were you like active and had callings all the way up until recently?
Oh, absolutely. My faith crisis started last February, just a year ago. And it was by reading the Race and the Priesthood essay.
Really?
And
On LDS.org?
I found it through some blog from some member out there somewhere, because I didn't even know they existed, as most people don't. And I read that, and because I served my mission in Alabama in 1979 to 1981, the race issue was
I'm
always...
sorry.
What?
I'm sorry. That's just like the worst place for a young gay man to serve. It's Alabama.
Well,
go
but
ahead.
again,
I know
I
you weren't
wasn't a
gay.
young gay man. I was a fully believing
just a
Mormon
young man.
missionary. I had seen a LDS social services counselor before I went on my mission, and he said, "You're not gay. Don't worry about it. You maybe have a few more feminine tendencies, but just go on your mission and don't worry about it." And so the race and the priesthood issue, though, was always something in the forefront of our life as a missionary in Alabama, especially 1 year after the revelation, because we dealt with it on a constant daily basis, and we were tracting in areas of Alabama that had never been tracted before. They'd never seen Mormon missionaries because the church didn't even bother.
Wow.
And so when I read in the Race and the Priesthood essay that the doctrines that they taught were not doctrines, but only theories, I said, bullshit, because I was out there, and I remember the letters from the first presidency. I have a copy of one of them that taught them as doctrines, and then realized that, hey, this crap that I've been fed all my life about the church not being able to lead us astray, they just led us astray for 120, 130 years. And that's what opened the door to my faith crisis. And within 3 months, I was out.
Wow. Well, you and Mike Tannehill share something in common. You both abhorred that.
That's
right. For totally different reasons.
So this was
that's where the
so...
similarities end.
Yes, that's right.
I hope so.
So your essay was so interesting to me, Don, because I think you really hit the nail on the head in terms of pointing out that identity, your personal identity, and how you identify yourself or how you view yourself is such an important component of what that means for you as a person. So, like, I was thinking about this today. I mean, your what's the word? Like your nature, you, Don. In one way, you could say, you really haven't changed. You're the same person, and I think this is kind of comparable to the way that we, like everybody who leaves the church, kind of thinks, well, I'm really the same person that I always was. It's everything else that changed, right? It's the church that suddenly changed on this. But the effect that had on you was one where kind of the ground shifts under you, and suddenly you had to re-identify yourself. I just think that's so interesting that you're talking about, you lived this, basically your first 53 years and didn't identify as being gay, didn't identify with any of these things, that now you've come to own your identity as your sexual orientation is different than most people.
Don.
I'm going to say, so the faith crisis happened last spring. My wife announced a divorce in March, and the divorce was final in June. And so, and a business that I had started failed at the same time. So the foundation of my life was totally ripped out from under me in all ways. Wow. And it was one of those transitions that the church never really alludes to, because they don't believe it, that is, I'm on the floor in a fetal position in tears because I've lost this foundation of the church in my life. And of those three major things, the career loss and the marriage loss, the church was the biggest piece. Because whenever I had problems in other areas, the church is always what I turned to before. And now I didn't have that anymore. And it was gut-wrenchingly just painful and emotional. But once I made that through that pain in September, October last year, I finally said, well, hey, if there is not a God who cares whether or not I am attracted to men or women, because I'm agnostic at this point in time, then why the hell am I still not exploring this? And so the loss of the belief in the Mormon Church was what allowed me to finally say, I don't have to pretend to not be gay anymore. I can get rid of all of those old tapes that you heard in the listener's essay, and I can support myself and actually and embrace the nature that I do have, which has been ever since my teens that I'm attracted to men. And even in the 2 months since I did the listener's essay, which I did at the end of December, I have really only truly come out to myself and others as a gay man in the past 2 months. Because you'll notice at the end of the listener's essay, I didn't even say at that point that I'm a gay man because I couldn't. I was still in transition. And
Right.
so I didn't feel it appropriate to go back and amend the essay because I wanted to have that aspect of the borderline asexual in there, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But if I were to redo the essay right now, I would change that ending and I would say, yes, I am a gay man and I love it and it's fantastic. And I've been waiting for this type of fulfillment for all of my adult life, and this is fantastic.
So that's the other portion I was going to ask you about. Was there was a part in your essay where you said that there was at least sometimes, or at least a part of you kind of wished that you weren't asexual, or that you weren't homosexual, that you wished that you were heterosexual, or that you wished that you were more heteronormative.
Right.
Do you feel different about that now than you did when you recorded it?
Yeah, I would say I do feel different about that because I've been out there and have experienced acceptance from other men and experienced wonderful love and gay sex with men, let's be frank. And I had not when I did the essay. And so I would say that there is a part of me that is certainly happier because when I said that before, I had no idea what I was about to experience, and now I have. But if you think about it, would you ever want to be black, or would any of you on this call want to be in a sexual minority? It's just crazy that people out there think that people like myself choose this type of an orientation because it sucks with respect to how other people view you.
Yeah, I'm totally dripping in privilege. I'm white.
Right.
I'm male. I'm in America. I mean, if this was like a membership, I'd re-up every year.
Yeah, you're educated.
I'm straight.
Yeah, right.
I'm in every majority that you could possibly be in. And it's great. And I can understand how somebody on the outside, if they haven't really been able to come to grips with who they really are, would want to be in that club. But what you're telling us, Don, is it gets better, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I will certainly admit that my journey is unique and my own. But it is, I've watched a few gay movies that one called Latter Days. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. But it's about a missionary that has sex with a neighbor on his mission and gets excommunicated, and it's good stuff. Anyway, a lot of these gay movies show that the gay individual has to leave his family and find a new family within the gay community. And there was a part of me when I first started seeing these movies saying, does it really have to be that way? And unfortunately for some of us, it does, because as I said at the end of the essay, I am less frequently trying to look for approval with people who either cannot or will not give it to me. And there will be members of my family that fall into that camp. I have not actually come out yet to my family of origin, and most of my adult children, I've only come out to one of them. And so I still have that in the future. And I know that especially my family of origin, that there are going to be some that just cannot handle that. And so in the absence of getting that from people who should love you unconditionally, sometimes you do have to look elsewhere. And it has been fantastic in the ex-Mormon community, the amount of acceptance and validation that I've been able to receive.
So from your essay, one thing that I couldn't get, maybe I'm just thick and everyone else got it, was I didn't get a sense of the timetable from when you got married, and I don't know, you listed off all the therapists that you went through, but it just seemed like to me, because you didn't mention kids or anything, I didn't get a sense of how long it was that before you got divorced.
26 years.
26 years, and how many
I
kids?
think he mentioned a year in there somewhere.
Yeah,
I remember thinking, oh, it was a long time.
I did mention after 26 years of marriage, we
Oh,
finally.
okay.
Yeah.
I
So
think I got fixated on how many therapists you went through.
Yes. Matter of fact, one of the therapists my wife and I saw, this is just sort of a name drop here, was actually Wendy Watson. Do you know who Wendy Watson is?
Oh, yeah.
She's the new wife of Elder Nelson.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
the young new wife. Yeah.
Yeah, relatively speaking.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, so there was a lot of therapists, but 26 years of marriage, and my wife knew before we got married that I was attracted to men. We were sort of like the Josh and Lolly Weeds, if you know who they are. They were sort of the original poster couple for mixed orientation marriage, or
they were on CNN, weren't they?
Yeah. Or like the three couples in the TLC special, where we were part of Evergreen and North Star, and I did the Journey into Manhood weekend, and I had 20 years of reparative therapy.
Jeez.
And so I was one of those couples on TLC. Matter of fact, I personally know two of them. And that is the circles that I ran in. And up until 9 months ago, I believed exactly the way that they presented in that show.
Wait, reparative therapy like shock therapy?
No. That's what everybody goes to. But now shock therapy was only back in the early 70s.
That's what I thought.
Reparative therapy is the idea that homosexuality is not something that you're born with, but instead it is something that is caused by your upbringing, your nurturing. And so in my case, it was because my brothers basically rejected me and called me a sister, more or less. And my father was distant and my mother was emotionally smothering. And so that's the textbook example of why I'm gay. And so the whole idea is that if we go back and figure out why that all happened, and if I get more in touch with my masculinity, then I can become heterosexual.
That's pseudoscience.
Yeah, I mean, I've got two brothers and a mom and a dad, and by that description, I'm sounding pretty gay right now. Because I mean, whose brothers really? Whose brothers haven't made them feel like they were at one point or another. I mean, that's just to some extent. I think that I've heard that description before or that excuse or that reason for why those therapists think that way, and kind of their explanation for the origin of homosexuality. And it's always just kind of boggles my mind, like, well, yeah, emotionally distant father and a smothering mother. Sounds pretty common.
Right. I think homosexuality would be about 50% at least.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, yeah, it's sort of like the old Packer masturbation thing, where everybody that masturbates is going to be a homosexual too.
Right.
Yeah. The slippery slope.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, so let me ask the three infants on here, since you're Man and Erica, obviously you're not, so I'm not going to ask you. But did the three of you have issues feeling not masculine enough, or like not as masculine as other guys when you were growing up?
I don't think so. I mean, I was never super athletic, and I think I hit puberty a little bit late, and so there were those issues, but I never felt like I wasn't masculine enough. I was really I mean I really liked girls, so I didn't ever have any questions about that, and so no, that's my answer.
So is that Scott or Jake? I can't.
That's Scott. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was a
Randy and Jake.
Okay, so this is Randy. I was a meathead jock, and I was raised in a family where sports was the center of everything, culturally, and so no, because I was always into sports. Never interested in like home ec or anything like that. Although I did, because our family was so poor, I did make my own cookies. So I was the family baker.
I was interested in home ec.
I didn't like iron or anything, so I was pretty masculine.
Yeah.
I made cookies once.
Man, if cookies are gay, sign me up.
Yeah, exactly. I'm in.
That was totally gay for cookies. We didn't have any cookies in the house, so I made cookies constantly. So I was a baker, but I don't know. I mean, that didn't. No one ever questioned my masculinity, so I honestly can't relate to that. I mean, when you told your story of how your brothers were out there running the tractor and you were in canning, preserves, that wasn't familiar with me, but I can sympathize, but I can't empathize. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So in my case, like I did play a lot of sports, but I also like my family was really into musical theater and things like that. I mean, that's not necessarily not masculine, but it's not necessarily masculine either. I don't know. It's kind of one of the. It's a little gay. It's a little gay. No. But yeah, there was. I mean, I had this. When I was really young, I had this experience where like a male cousin of mine and I like did kind of a play doctor. You show me yours, I'll show you mine. You show me yours type thing. And I was always really surprised that I didn't end up gay. Like
Really?
later in my mind, yeah, I feel like I was like, oh man, I'm glad I dodged that big gay bullet, or
Big gay bullet.
But
That's hilarious.
But it was because like that relationship, that kind of, I guess the underlying.
It's that narrative, yeah.
That narrative of that it comes from, that those kind of from the little factories where these experiences can pervert somebody from the very beginning, where it's this kind of tragic misstep early on, and then forever your path is sealed. That narrative was very strong in my mind. So it was always kind of in the back of my head where I was like, man, I can't believe that I made it, So that was kind of I don't know if that really answers your question, but it's what came to mind when you asked.
Well, it does answer my question, and Jake, you're a big man in my eyes for admitting that. Good for you. The reason I asked is that so a big part of reparative therapy, and especially within the Mormon movement of Journey into Manhood, which is the experiential weekend that you go away for 3 days and learn how to be more of a man so that you can become heterosexual rather than homosexual.
Doesn't Journey into Manhood just sound like the gayest thing you've ever heard? Okay.
The emphasis is that a lot of gay men end up being more sensitive and more into arts and into things that aren't the go out and play sports and go out and shoot the deer and that type of thing. And so the idea is to help them experience some of those things so that they can then become less gay. And one of the parts of reparative therapy that a lot of people did, it's nothing I did, but you actually have a sports camp where you can go for 2 or 3 days and learn how to play basketball and learn how to play baseball.
So instead of pray away the gay, it's play away the gay?
Yeah, seriously.
Now, Don, I heard from one of my friends that went to one of these things that there was kind of an exercise where they would have you like sit in like a motorcycle position, like with another dude, like two guys sitting on the ground, like basically spooning.
That is true. That in the Journey into Manhood weekend, as well as in weekly support groups that you can participate in after you've gone to the weekend, there is something that they call healthy holding. And the idea...
We got to try this, guys.
The idea is that the men who are struggling with unwanted feelings of same-sex attraction were not validated physically enough by their fathers or by other men, and so they have a need to be touched and to be held by other men in a non-sexual way. Okay? So one of the positions that you can choose to be in is sitting on the floor with another man who's going to hold you. His legs are apart. You sit in his, not lap, but, on the floor in front of him so that you are leaning back against him and he reaches around and he holds you. And so the reason they call it the motorcycle position is that that's sort of how you'd sit on a motorcycle. But, most guys don't reach around and hold the other guy. They hold on to the thing in back of them, right?
Right.
Okay?
Because
you don't want to be gay.
Right. Exactly.
So
yeah, most guys don't ride on other motorcycles with
other guys.
That's
I
the
have.
first step. But if you did, you're probably not like doing the girlfriend hold, the reach around. Yeah,
that's right. So that was always sort of uncomfortable for me, because there was a part of me now that I am holding and embracing other men. I know what I would like to maybe do by doing that, and that is to be sexual. And so to be in an intimate hold with another man and not be able to even think that that's a possibility was like way contradictory. It's like, this is really gay, but I'm not supposed to be thinking about it being in a gay way. And so it was really sort of a mind fuck for me.
Yeah, well, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to imagine myself. Okay, so a really hot girl sits down on the floor, and I'm supposed to sit down and straddle her and put my arms around her and not get excited. I'm going to get excited.
Right.
It's going to be involuntary.
That sounds like a Fear Factor challenge more than anything.
It sounds like torture as well.
Yeah, it sounds freaking awful.
Yeah.
Now, I want to say that with respect to Journey into Manhood Weekend and some of the reparative therapy things that I did, they were very, very, very beneficial to me. Matter of fact, they provided a sort of a foundation of sort of reclaiming my masculinity, because my brothers really did alienate me from that. And, gay men are men, and we want to be masculine just like other men, in the sense that we don't want to be thought of as something other than a man. We don't want to be a third sex. We're just a man that happens to be attracted to other men. And so the Journey into Manhood Weekend and some of the reparative therapy actually was very, very helpful. And I do want to say that for Mormon men, or it's not just Mormons that go into this, they actually take people from other religions, but usually it's like really fundamental type religions like Mormonism, who are trying to figure out what is going on with this attraction thing in the context of their religion. It gives them something to focus on and hope that it's not just that they're perverted, like Elder Packer says. So rather than I'm bad, sick, and wrong, my dad didn't love me and my mom smothered me, or I had this show me yours, I'll show you mine, or more sexual exploration in my youth, that is why I have the same-sex attraction. And so it allows the man to take it out of themselves and to blame it on something external to them rather than keeping it internal. And
plus you're with other people, right? That are
you get the
quote
support.
unquote,
you're no longer alone. You're no longer alone, and you have hundreds of other guys now that have done this Journey into Manhood Weekend, and they have reunions and they have weekly meetings after you come back from the weekend, and it really is beneficial if someone is really going to be trying to stay in the Mormon Church.
Yeah, it sounds like apologetics. I'm not comfortable with this.
Yeah, I think I can see. I can see what you're saying though, in terms of it at least gives them an outlet, or at least gives them some kind of method to deal with it. But it doesn't sound like you're saying that you think it's a great idea.
If someone, it's sort of like with the mixed orientation marriage idea. If, like those couples that were shown in that TLC special,
Yeah.
I believe that it's fantastic that it's working out for them. And I think that there is a small subset of couples that can have a mixed orientation marriage and have that work. You know, according to John DeLynne's statistics, which were part of my listener's essay, 75% of all mixed orientation marriages end in divorce. But that is only an option, in my opinion, if you are diehard committed to the church and you can find a partner, in my case, a woman, who is so secure in her sexuality that she doesn't need me to affirm her in it, because I can't. And if you can find that situation, it can work, and it's going to be a better situation than staying celibate would be if you're going to stay in the church. But it's a whole heck of a lot easier to just get rid of the church, is what I'm saying. Because
That's the factor right there.
Yeah.
But the problem is, you can't just like stick something into some file into someone's head and drain their belief in the church. And that's, I see what you're saying there is like, if there's some people that they're just going to believe no matter what, this is something. I mean, but it's a very small subset. And I fear that the majority of the people that go through this program are tortured.
And the statistics that John DeLynne has said, and obviously the Journey into Manhood program in and of itself is not reparative therapy, and his statistics were about reparative therapy. But reparative therapy, 80% of those who he surveyed, and I think it was, 1,600 participants, said that it was either ineffective or actually damaging to undergo, reparative therapy.
Yeah, those statistics are pretty damning.
So going back to my question, what, and this kind of goes along with what we're talking about, when you were, throughout your adolescence, throughout your adulthood, and you didn't associate yourself, you didn't identify as gay, what was separating you? Like, how were you different? How did you see yourself different as a gay man or the gay community? Or, what was it about you that you saw yourself as being, well, I'm not one of them. I'm just same-sex attracted. I'm not gay.
Okay, well, one is that I had never acted on the feelings. So I went for 54 years of my life and had never touched another man with sexual intent.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the one thing. The other thing is that's what the church was telling me. You asked about my callings in the church. I've been in 3 bishoprics. I've been on the Stake High Council. I've been a temple worker. And
you're
active.
I'm gonna say your Bob's Mormon cred scale is through the roof. I think you score 100.
I didn't go to BYU.
That shouldn't even be on there. That shouldn't.
I was at University of Utah. Go Utes. So
that's close
that's
enough.
Pretty close. That's at least 5 points. That's a 95.
Okay. So what was the question?
You were talking about your callings.
Oh, how you were different from those gay men.
20 years ago, got connected with LDS Social Services in Evergreen, which is now no longer, but it was the go-to organization for the LDS Church at that time, even though it was not an official arm of the church or LDS Social Services. They were financially supported by the LDS Church. And when Evergreen had its annual conferences, an apostle sometimes, but usually if not an apostle, a 70 would actually come and be a keynote speaker. So it had some pretty heavy endorsement, from the LDS Church. And when back at that time, the mission statement of Evergreen actually had in it that you could change, that your sexual orientation could be changed. In latter years, they changed it to be a diminishing of attraction to your same sex. And so I wholeheartedly, as well as my wife, ex-wife, wholeheartedly believed what we were being told, that if we went through all of this counseling and did the things that we were told we should do, that I eventually would see a diminishing of my attraction to men and an increase of my attraction to my wife. And as I said in the essay, we believed that God loved us enough and would bless us enough that we could make it work. And so I had no reason to identify as a gay man because the church told me that those didn't exist, that those were perverts, and I wasn't a pervert. I don't want to be a pervert.
It sounds like you had a stronger identity towards the church than you did with the sexuality or being homosexual.
Absolutely.
That was what you were more closely choosing to align yourself with.
Yeah.
And then when that fell apart, then you really had to kind of put the pieces together. And I like the analogy that you used about like a board book or the book with the sliding pieces of a body, where it just seemed like things were shifting for you.
Yeah, something fell into place. Yeah. Well, the other piece was the libido testosterone issue. So I do have this genetic issue, which basically my androgen receptors of the cells in my bodies do not process hormones or any hormone like testosterone. So even though I have a healthy level of testosterone in my body, it's like I have none. And so even though that wasn't detected until 15 years ago, it has been a factor in my whole life. And so I really think that that curse or blessing, whichever it was, depending on which way I look at it, was a factor in that I did not have a strong sexual drive that caused me to have to place the belief and commitment to Mormonism in question because this sexual drive was so high, because mine was not.
And you mentioned how there was a shift from prior to your marriage. I mean, that would be such a benefit. Like you could have been engaged for a long time. I couldn't stand being engaged for more than a couple months. We had to just get married because
you were going to jump her bones.
Right, something was going to happen. And but then after you're married, then things shifted, and that became different for you. Because she had certain expectations,
right,
that weren't where you were comfortable with being, but you would have never known that prior to the marriage because you were living the church's standards and the church's narrative, and that just, I mean, it's, I was thinking about this, especially with having a genetic disorder or genetic variance, of what a mind job that is, just to say that, oh, this is the way that life is, and you just have to hope that everything will work out after you get married. That's just not the way that it is for a lot of people.
Well, it's not, and I appreciate your understanding of that, and not that I want to focus a lot on this genetic issue that I have, but the reason I wanted it to be part of the essay is that it goes into that Liam Neeson Kinsey quote I did, that we each are very unique as an individual. And I happen to have this genetic thing which has a pretty big impact on my sexuality. But if I didn't have that, I'm still me. And I am unique and different than everybody else on this call with respect to a lot of things, and certainly with respect to my sexuality. And so that's why I think the idea of a Kinsey scale of 0 to 6 between homosexuality and heterosexuality and by in between is just so limiting, because there's this diverse spectrum, I call it a scattergraph in the essay, of uniqueness where we want to ourselves, or others want to put us in these categories, and we do ourselves and others a disservice when we do that, because we're all very unique, not with respect to just our sexuality, but certainly with respect to our sexuality.
There's one thing I wanted to talk about, though, because whenever it seems to be the focus that, because it's usually the examples you hear is a gay man marrying a straight woman. I don't know. You just don't hear as much the other way around. But everyone focuses on how horrible it is for the guy But I want to talk about what it was like for your wife, because she had to settle for something that was not what she knew. I'm assuming she didn't know what she was signing up for. Can you describe to me what it was like for your wife? Do you guys even talk about this?
I can describe absolutely what it was like for my wife. In the listener essay, I had the soundbite in there from the Young Turks. I don't know if you recognize that. Or it was.
I did recognize the Young Turks, yeah.
Where she basically says that as a woman, she would hate to be married to a man who basically had to settle for marrying her when he wasn't attracted to her in order to live his religion. That would be awful to be in that situation. And I put that specific soundbite in the listener's essay right before my wife says I might as well have married a woman purposefully, because I am compassionate to what she went through. It was a very hard thing for her. She had a very vibrant sexual drive, and I did not. Part of that was due to the hereditary or the genetic issue, but a bigger part of that was probably due to the fact that I was not attracted to her. And she had a hard time with that our full marriage, and understandably so. It was the biggest issue of conflict and arguments in our marriage was our sexuality and the fact that I was not attracted to her. It was very hard for her.
Yeah, it's you cited that documentary, right? Where they followed the three couples that had 3 gay men with 3 straight women. 4 polygamy kicked in there.
Yeah.
But
that'd be weird. Mixed orientation polygamy.
Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah, so
odd.
that special on TLC was called "My Husband's Not Gay."
Yeah, so I guess my point is the church focuses on the guy, and they never consider the woman as a total victim. So they encourage these men get married. That'll straighten you up. And it seems like they never consider what sacrifice the woman is giving in it. And it just breaks my heart.
It is a very hard thing for a woman to do. Matter of fact, when you would go to these evergreen conferences, they did have breakout sessions for the wives of the men. And there are some heartbreaking tales there, especially the ones who did not know their husbands were attracted to men when they got married and find out after infidelity. And it's a much bigger blow to a woman, I think, to have her husband have an affair with a man than it is even with a woman. Because what does that say to you as a woman about your sexuality?
Yeah, that would be a mind job to have your spouse go through. I can't even imagine.
Yeah, Friends addresses that when Ross's wife has an affair with a woman, and he doesn't even know. It's so disorienting. He didn't even know how to react. You have kids. How many kids again? I mean, I don't think you said.
I have 7 adult children. And
oh my
4
God!
grandchildren.
What?
Why is that such a reaction? I'm Mormon.
Well, you're borderline asexual, but you're the pedophilia.
He just said he doesn't identify as asexual. That's just where he was 2 months ago.
I know.
Thank you, Erica, for listening.
He does have a genetic variation there. He does have so anyway, one of my worst.
Well, Randy, wait a minute. So, Randy, do the math. I said that my stride was once every 3 weeks. I was married for 26 years. I think that with that amount of sexual activity, I can produce children.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Yeah, my wife's not that fertile, so I can't. Anyway, so I'm flipping around with the kids, and you raised all the kids in the church, and now they're all adults, or at least probably most of them. Are they all adults?
Yeah, the youngest is going to turn 18 here in another month.
Oh, goodness. So they're all fully indoctrinated, and just the thought, and I've had friends whose children turned on them because their faith crisis came at a point where the kids were already indoctrinated. So is that what you're facing right now?
Yes. So I told my children in September last year that I no longer believed the church was true. And it was very, very hard for them. My oldest daughter broke down in tears and said, how can I comprehend, how can I process that the man who gave me my faith no longer believes it? And my son, who was a returned missionary of a couple of years, knew he was going to have a hard time. He didn't talk to me for 2 weeks, and then he did make a phone call to me and said, Dad, I want to apologize. You're still my dad. I love you. I'll always love you. This is very hard for me, but I'm sorry that I've treated you this way. So it was really, really hard for them, especially on the heels of their mother and I divorcing just 3 months previous. So we had the divorce. I dropped the bomb that I'm no longer believing in the Mormon Church. And
now step 3, I'm gay.
That's right,
Oh my God, that's like the most difficult reveal I've ever heard of.
Well,
Sorry,
so here's the thing. My kids do know that I have same-sex attraction. So there were opportunities throughout life where they were made aware of that, and I won't go into how that happened. But so I told them, though, at that time, because I believed it, that the reparative therapy idea as to what that meant and why I had it, and that I'll never act on it. Well, so I'm now acting on it, and that is going to be hard for them. It is going to be a triple whammy, and not looking forward to doing that. But I firmly believe, as I've seen happen with so many Mormon families who have had teenage children come out gay, like the Abdus, how do you say it, Jake and
Abhow.
And
yeah, they're good friends of mine.
And then there's the Montgomerys. And you have all these people who were so into the church that have now embraced their gay children and have opened up their horizons to be so more expansive and inclusive of people and life in general. And I feel sort of like a pioneer in the sense that I am going to provide that opportunity for my children. And they are going to be better because of it.
Yeah.
And not only they'd be better, but everyone around them in the Mormon Church will be better for it.
Is there any one child that you're more worried about their reaction, or is it all kind of?
Well, fortunately,
equally?
I currently live with a daughter, my second oldest daughter, who had a very more sensitive bullshit detector and left the church just as soon as she could after age 18.
Oh, okay.
And so she knows I'm out of the church. She knows that I'm gay. Matter of fact, she told me, Dad, you're gay. Just accept it. Quit giving me this bullshit. Don't give me this bullshit that you're same-sex attracted. You're gay. So it's been, and I'm living with her, and so it's been very validating to be able to have this safe haven while I go through this transition after the divorce. With the other kids, they're each so individual. I'm not worried about a couple of them. Probably 2 or 3 of them. It's going to be sketchy.
Well, I was completely blown away when you said how recently you went through this disaffection process, because there was this real measured kind of self-awareness and in your essay that wasn't like it didn't feel as kind of raw and out of control as I did. When I was 2 months out, I was like, I was much more reactionary than your essay felt. It felt so. I mean, it was so real, like Randy said, and so raw, but also very. I don't know. There's like so much like wisdom in it. It was like so. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah,
exactly.
You had a really good perspective.
Yeah, an unbelievable amount of perspective.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. But the 2 months is coming out to myself as being gay. So the disaffection from the church started last February, and I would say I was finished with that by August. So, and the reason that I think I have been able to come to a place of peace with that as much as I am is I really went into the depths of hell and back again emotionally. And had the ability or took the time or out of necessity truly worked through all the steps of grief 10 times and got it out of my system to the point where, once I've done this podcast and some other things that I have in the works, I fully plan by summer, which is when I'll turn 55, to walk away and not care anymore. I'm done with the church. I don't want to keep this up like you guys are. I just want to be done with it.
Right.
Yeah. Good for you.
Yeah. Way to go.
We just can't let it go.
Yeah.
Just wallowing in.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and so this is kind of not necessarily non sequitur, but it's probably more related to what we were talking about earlier. But it was something where when you described the situation when you were with your wife and you were married, but people around you could see that you weren't happy, and they were suggesting, they were suggesting divorce as an option, and you both said, "Oh, forget that. We're sticking with it." I mean, that's a situation that doesn't seem as common as kind of the opposite, where somebody is considering divorce, but people within the church are saying, "Hey, don't do that. It's fine." So, I mean, what was the mentality surrounding that reaction?
Well, as I put in there a quote, which the voice you probably didn't recognize because it's probably somebody just from the curriculum department of the church, but it was a quote from Spencer W. Kimball, where he basically says any good man and any good woman can have a happy and successful marriage. And my wife and I were two of these 120% committed Mormons, where we will do it and we will push the handcart and we will bury our children on the plains and we will be happy for the experience because God has given us these experiences to exalt us and bring us back to Him. I believe that shit.
Right. I mean, you were 120% committed. Okay, so it was in that commitment and in that, I guess I just can't imagine how much of a mindfuck that would be to be in a situation. I mean, I guess being younger, I guess I'm not as used to this idea of the true kind of reparative therapy, like, where it really started in the kind of the evergreen stage of you can get over this, like 100% healing guaranteed. That level of bullshit is so much more harmful and so much more destructive emotionally when it doesn't pan out, because it's not going to. Like
absolutely. Because if my wife and I would have been able to have been told the truth, which I have a good friend right now who is going to BYU. He just got back from his mission 6 months ago, and he's in the process of coming out as a gay man. And he went to a counselor at BYU of all places, and the counselor told him, "You should embrace your sexuality and leave the church."
Really?
That kind of thing didn't happen 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
I mean,
we have a friend who's a counselor at BYU right now, and like he was like, it's a haven among BYU. Like there's a sense of openness that I'm sure was not there, 20, 30 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. So if
even at BYU,
someone would have been able to tell my wife and I in premarital counseling that, this is really going to be a challenge for you, and your husband's attraction to other men is never going to go away because it is a part of him, and he is never going to be attracted to you like you may want him to be, we would have never gotten married. Absolutely not. And to have been given, matter of fact, I went back here 20 years later recently to someone who is very involved in this whole process and said, why, I feel a little bit led astray here. Why were you saying 20 years ago that we could change when it's obvious that we can't?
Yeah. Where's your prophet now?
And they basically said, it was really theoretical at that time. We had this idea as to what maybe was going on, but we didn't have any actual data, and so we were doing the best that we could. So,
okay, so prophets need data now.
Well, but again, this wasn't the prophet. This was just
the prophet
counselor.
was spewing the bullshit from above, and it trickled down.
That's true.
But I bet those people at that time were thinking they were progressive, right? We're not saying that people with same-sex attraction are of the devil. You know, we're saying, oh, it's just something we need to work through. They probably like thought of themselves as progressive at that time,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Matter of fact, when I went to my first Evergreen conference, it was one of the most spiritual things I'd had ever participated in, because you had these hundreds of people dealing with the same issue, taking the risk of making it known that they had this issue,
right,
and supporting each other in it. And it was just wonderful to have that experience. And the people in it, including some of the ones that I did the sound clips on, the one voice you hear that says, I've helped thousands of men in their journeys to overcome same-sex attraction. His name is David Matheson. He's in a mixed orientation marriage himself, and he is one of the creators of the Journey into Manhood weekend, and he's a wonderful, fantastic individual. I saw him personally as a counselor, and he helped me tremendously. All of these people that are in this reparative therapy community within the LDS Church are fantastically wonderful, heart, open, caring, compassionate people.
They're just victims of an institution.
That's correct.
So
well, they have the unfortunate job of trying to make reality fit into theology, and so where there's gaps there, this is the same thing that apologists do, is where there's gaps or where there's things that don't fit, they're the ones who are left to basically construct the absurd to make it seem to work together. And that's not, Randy, you're talking about, well, prophets need data, but it's not the prophets who do this kind of heavy lifting. I mean, these people have to go out on their own and form organizations and form groups and kind of just wing it. I mean, they're just out there just making this stuff up.
Yeah,
because how do they try to fit their lives in with everything that they've been taught? And they're just doing the best that they can.
Yeah, I totally believe that the foot soldiers are the heroes. It's the guys in the ivory tower that are giving commands without knowing anything. They're fucking ignorant douchebags giving ignorant commands without any understanding of what's going on. And then they leave it to these really good people that Don just described to clean up the mess that they made.
Right.
And that just pisses me off. I'm sorry.
Well, and to have the general authorities so recently is the last big PR thing that they did about, political LGBT rights and all that stuff. And to have Boyd K. Packer say the things that he has said as recently as he has said them,
right,
is just mind-numbingly ridiculous in 2015.
Right.
That the institution that claims to have God at its head, with a prophet that speaks directly to that God, to be so
oblivious
and mean-spirited. It's just like Spencer W. Kimball said in that sound clip, the homosexuality is a deep, dark, ugly sin. And that's why I did not say I was gay for all of my life, is I did not want to have that classification.
To be fair, most people that are 80 and 90 years old grew up in the culture where that was the case, right? Like the average age of the general authority, Jake, weren't you saying like it's 81 or something?
It's 80 now. That's the average age of the
like there's
which is the oldest it's ever been.
Yeah, because of science and modern medicine, keeping these guys older and older.
No, it's because God really likes this set. He's got the board set the way he likes it. He's going to leave it there.
The chess pieces are staying. And I mean, like, I don't want to like say it's okay what they're saying, but like, how many 80-year-olds are, really jumping on the bandwagon of where reality is?
Yeah, that's a good point, Erica, to contrast like what all of those guys grew up with the church's current stance. I mean, when you put it that way, it makes it sound really progressive. Like they've had to come a really long way from where they started.
Yeah, but I get what you're saying, Erica. But all that is an indictment of the system. It's an authoritative gerontocracy.
I think it's an indictment of culture, like of their culture, of American culture from the 1930s on.
Yeah, it's an indictment of their culture, but now their culture is in charge of the young generation of people who sustain them as prophets, seers, and revelators. It's a shitty bullshit system, and where you outlive all your peers and you get to say what goes. It's a stupid way to run an organization, and
Right,
it's always
and I don't want to
conservatively.
And I don't want to, I don't know. I don't think they're right. And I think they're causing a lot of harm. And that makes me really upset and really angry. But at the same time, I feel like you have to kind of understand where they're coming from at the same time. You know what I mean?
But why?
Yeah,
Why do you have to understand where they're coming from?
I understand where they're coming from, and I think it's ridiculous because kids are killing themselves because of these dipshits.
Right. No, absolutely. And
so I'm with you, Erica. I agree that we can be understanding of where they're coming from, but we certainly don't have to condone it. No. I don't think you're saying that.
No.
It is certainly a generational thing, which is having a hard time dying out within the Mormon Church. And if you look at the length of time it took for the blacks to get the priesthood, which now we're told was never a God-ordained thing, and the number of years it took for that to change, the number of years that they've really had to seriously look at this issue of LGBTQ rights, it has been very compressed.
Right.
And the church moves very, very, very slowly.
Right.
But I totally agree with Randy. In the meantime, people are killing themselves.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So before you're done with Mormonism, Don, I want to ask you this question because you are uniquely qualified to answer this question,
cool.
Because you're gay. Now that you finally
yes, I am a gay man.
Yes, shout it from the rooftop.
Shout it. That's right, loud and proud.
The church, and you served in many leadership capacities for decades, so you got way more cred than any infant could ever dream. All of us combined, really, and. So the question is okay. So I'm going to set it up with the church has receded a lot. You said it was compressed because of the cultural kind of momentum.
Right.
They've receded. They went from hooking up homosexuals' balls to electrodes and making them watch gay porn, and if they got an erection, they would shock them. That's barbaric. But you have a choice, you're choosing. And then now they've receded pretty quickly, relatively speaking, to say, okay, it's not a choice. You can't change, but we can change your behavior. And that's kind of where they are now. And so the question is, do you think that the theology will ever change where the church will reverse, like they did with blacks in the priesthood, gays, and whether, gays can get married in the temple? Ever. I'm not talking about, I mean, ever.
I think that's two questions. I will answer it as two questions.
Okay.
I think that within 20 to 30 years, you will have the Mormon Church change their position on it being okay for gays to marry and to be in a monogamous relationship, a committed relationship. I believe within 20 to 30 years, they will say that's okay. I do not ever believe that they will allow it in the temple.
Well, that's kind of split the difference there.
Yeah.
Because in order to allow it in the temple, you have to change the whole fucking plan of salvation.
Exactly. That's my whole point. I am of the opinion that they're going to go down with the ship on this one because it's too central to the theology. Blacks in the priesthood was kind of peripheral, but this is right at the center of the family and eternal families and progression and all that.
I think you're right, Randy, but I don't know. I've heard, and maybe you can respond to this, Don. What about the doctrine of adoption, the law of adoption? And I mean, Mormons already kind of just throw their hands in the air, like they don't, when
they're
they
a
get
true player.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. Like they just don't care. No, like they get married and they get sealed to other people, and they just sort of say, "Well, God will sort it all out. Like everything will be fine in the afterlife." You couldn't see that ever being the case, where the church kind of finds some wiggle room on that.
Well, that's a good point because the church already has to deal with all of the broken families. And then remarriages and where do the kids go and
I see this at work all the time where people
right.
get into these blended situations, and then it's like you try to figure out like who's sealed to who and like what, like if this person resigns, like does that change? It's just you can't make sense of it.
Oh, absolutely. And even with my 7 kids, one of the first questions some of them asked me was, well, what's going to happen to us? Who are we going to be sealed to? Because you and Mom got divorced. And, technically our sealing is still in place. But if I resign, which I likely will come summer, that will no longer be the case. And so that's a huge mind fuck from my kids. What's going to happen to us? We're going to be orphans in the celestial kingdom.
Oh, no. But you'll have your wife and all your other wives. And
you mean all my other men wives or what?
No, I'm talking about your kids. Like, they're like, I'm going to be an orphan in eternity. No, you're going to be a god. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Be a god.
But so no, I totally think that the church could play the card of it will all be worked out by God when it comes down to what's going to happen to these couples that are in a same-sex marriage that we're now saying is okay 20 years from now. I don't think they're going to try and explain it. I think they're going to say, we're okay as long as you're committed to each other. We'll accept you. You can have a calling. You just can't go into the temple. It's sort of going to be like a black and the priesthood thing where there's a level of acceptance, but not all in. Because, again, to go all in just totally messes with the plan of salvation. So sort of case in point, I was aware on my mission of a individual in one of the wards who had been a woman and had a reassignment surgery and is now living as a man, and was married to a woman, and both of them were active participants in the ward.
No, wait a minute. Did the former woman get the priesthood?
No.
Okay.
And that's in the handbook. That cannot happen.
Okay.
That's not allowed, but...
There's no back door to the priesthood for women.
That's what you're trying to go. Yeah.
Sorry, I was trying to make a joke.
Try and sell that one to ordained women.
I didn't want to be the one to say it, but that's where I was going.
That's funny.
But
there's another way.
That man who used to be a woman could say a prayer, and if the bishop was okay with that, I don't know if there's any policy for that or against that. And so I can see something like that happening in the future, where if I were an active Mormon and I was in a committed married relationship with my gay partner, and we were only being sexual together and not outside of the marriage, that the church would welcome us as a participant in the congregation. We just wouldn't be allowed to hold the priesthood and go into the temple.
Yeah.
Basically, what I'm saying is 20 or 30 years from now, gay couples may be able to be on the level of blacks. The blacks were for the last 130 years. Yeah.
I can totally see that happening because, there's lots of people talking about, is marriage going to start happening outside of the temple and then sealings are inside of the temple, so that the sealing isn't necessarily the legal marriage, so that, more families can go. That seems to be, I can see that trend happening to where marriage happens outside of the temple and then sealings happen in the temple. So in that vein, it wouldn't be that hard to go to, men and men and women that are married, that's fine because they're civilly married. They just can't be sealed, but they can still be members of the church, just like a heterosexual couple that has been married outside of the church, outside of the temple, is still, part of the community.
Right. But here's one thing that will have to change. I don't know if you're aware of it in the church handbook. I can't remember where it's 1 or 2 that only the bishops and stake presidents get. But in there, it talks about the sins that are required to have a member's record annotated so that they cannot have callings to work with the youth. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
I
did, vaguely.
Because gay people are pedophiles.
That's right, because
they're the same.
Pedophiles is one of those. And if you have had homosexual relations with another person, you have to have your record annotated, and you cannot hold callings with the youth in the church.
Yeah,
and I think it was Benji Schwimmer's.
Benji Schwimmer, yep.
His interview that he did where he talked about how devastating that was to have that.
That's what took him out. I love his idea of having. He has a tattoo behind his ear that's an asterisk because he's been annotated.
He's been annotated as a member, as a human being. He's a human annotation.
It's so like, how Mormon is that too? That it's like, well, if you do this, we're gonna annotate you. Like there will be a record in a book somewhere that this is, like.
I think that's in Alma. It's like you'll be blotted out,
right?
And when you're blotted out on earth in the book of God, you'll be blotted out in heaven,
right?
So, Don, maybe to wrap us up here, unless anybody else has any questions, I'm kind of curious, what advice would you have to someone who's gone through some of these things that you've been through, someone who's in a mixed orientation marriage, someone who feels like they have same-sex attraction, or someone who's trying to struggle and put a pin on their identity?
Gee, that's a tall order. I think first I want to answer just to members of the church in general, and to, because the purpose of the Infants on Thrones podcast is to try and have a sense of humor about this screwed up life that we all used to live. Mm-hmm. And to me, for any couple or any individual to have a feeling like they have to suffer through a bad marriage or a bad decision because they made covenants in God's temple and God's not going to allow them into the celestial kingdom if they don't do their best to learn the lessons that he has provided for him. My want would be to offer a rethought of that thought process, to say, screw that. There is no God. There is no higher power who is giving you these challenges to prove yourself worthy to return back to the highest level of the celestial kingdom. And you may have just married the wrong person. And if that's the case, you may need to get a divorce, and that's okay. And you don't have to suffer through it because the bishop says you need to. Because if one of you leaves the church, that same bishop is going to tell them to divorce you anyway. And so don't listen to the bishop. Sorry, I have a little bit of anger there.
Yeah, you're better off being a gay husband than you are a non-believing husband, an apostate.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Or you're better off being in an abusive marriage because your bishop will counsel you to be patient and to be loving and unconditional and deal with the abuse than to have a disbelieving husband, because him you have to get rid of.
Or get rid of the behavior that's causing your husband to beat you. Or
there you go. There you go. As far as the same-sex attraction, gay issue thing goes, I appreciate you asking me, but because I really only come out to myself in the past 2 months, I really am probably not the best person to ask, because I lived in La La Land for 54 years. And that La La Land was, again, due because of my commitment to the LDS Church. I think the thing I've learned through this process, regardless of whether it is accepting myself because I am part of a sexual minority or for some other reason, and what I've learned is that I need to love me for who I am, warts and all, freckles and all, and regardless of what anyone else says, it doesn't matter. And sort of like that Liam Neeson quote again from the Kinsey movie, we're all different. And if we can stop trying to force other people to be like us so that we're more secure in our own fucked upness, and just let everybody be fucked up on their own, in their own special way, and love them for it, I think we'll all be great.
Now, what happened here was we ended the discussion, but later on Don and I spoke, and he gave us permission to use this very candid after discussion.
Well, thanks, Don. I really appreciate it. This has been great.
Yeah.
Thank you,
You're
Don.
welcome, and I thank you also. And you guys are fantastic. 5 stars all around.
Awesome. And good luck on your 3-month plan out of the church or whatever.
Yeah, I'll let you know what happens.
Yeah.
So cut this out. Don, before are you there?
I am.
Okay. So you have this genetic condition, but for 26 years you were forced to engage in sex that wasn't appealing to you, and now you finally come to grips with your sexuality. Has your libido increased?
Hell yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
To be honest, and since this is being cut out, I'll be very frank, but I had no idea that could feel so good.
It's so awesome to hear.
And it was because I had totally divested myself of the church before I made that step and started being sexual. There was absolutely no fucking shame. None at all. And that certainly is not a very common story with gay men within the Mormon Church. As I meet these other guys, which, I have opportunity with the online contacts that I have to have sex with hundreds of guys that are still wearing their garments and going to church and pretending that they're not gay. And the amount of shame and duality in their lives is just heart-wrenching. And so for me to be able to take that step and have none of that was so wonderful. And to feel the validation and the love and the sensuality that I do now with a man, I get why you guys like women, because that's what you feel. But I never felt that.
Oh, yeah.
It was a chore, absolutely. And to now have that be so natural and wonderful, it is awesome. It is just mind-blowingly awesome.
No pun intended.
And yeah, no pun intended. And hopefully that doesn't gross you out. But I love having sex with men.
Well, I think it's amazing that you, after 50 some odd years, that you can accept yourself like this and love yourself for who you are, because I just think it's amazing. And thanks so much for sharing your story and for letting us, learn from it and hear about it and ooh and ah about it, because it's incredible. Anyway.
Well, thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. And I will say again that part of the reason I'm in as good a place as I am is because of the reparative therapy and the amount of therapy I did do. Now, could it have been better if it was set up more openly and honestly? Absolutely. But in retrospect, am I one of those that really feels ripped off because I did that? No, I'm not, because I can look at it and take from it the good and reframe the stuff that was bullshit and get rid of that.
Right.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
One of the products of these marriages that John DeLyn's study shows 75% of men end up in divorce and blah blah blah, is that kids get brought into the world, and then those kids, that's why time machines are just such a bad idea. I hope we never figure out how to create a wormhole, because you're 54 and you could have had 30 years of amazing sex with men, but then whoop, your kids are all erased.
Absolutely, and I would not want to have that.
Yeah.
And the coin flip to that, Randy, is that I probably would have died of AIDS.
Oh, because you were that generation.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep. So in a way, the Mormon Church actually protected me, and I choose to view it in a positive light. I'm just focusing on the future.
You're a very healthy person right now.
I am. Thank you. It is hard won, I'll tell you.
Hi, this is Alan from Iraq, where beheadings over belief dwindling is still a thing. You can comment on this episode on the website infantsonthrones.com. And if you really like what you hear, give the Quorum a 5-star rating and write a short review on iTunes. I did. Anyone for the closing prayer?